Welcome to the Watering Hole from Metabolic Collective. Metabolic Collective's mission is to build grassroots communities that advance awareness of and access to metabolic therapies for psychiatric and neurological disorders. We envision a world where metabolic therapies are widely adopted. Our Watering Hole series is a space to connect people with shared interests so that new collaborations and groups can emerge. The purpose is to introduce members with shared interests so that they can launch their own groups. If you found this event outside of our website, then please visit our website and submit the Connect with Us form. These gatherings are for informational and educational purposes only and do not constitute medical advice. Metabolic Collective and our guest speakers do not provide individual or group medical or healthcare advice, and no provider-patient relationship is established. Interventions discussed may require professional guidance. Always consult your healthcare provider before making changes. I'm honored to introduce today's guest, Dr. Kristina Dobyns. Kristina is an integrative recovery specialist, nutrition therapy practitioner, and founder of Beyond Binge Eating, a holistic platform for women recovering from binge eating, compulsive food behaviors, and sugar addiction. She holds a PhD in somatic psychology and a master's in exercise science, and is a registered somatic movement therapist who weaves somatic tools, nervous system regulation, and metabolic strategies into practical, hope-filled recovery support. She hosts the Beyond Binge Eating podcast, where she explores food addiction, recovery, emotional eating, and the emerging field of metabolic psychiatry, highlighting how nutrition and body-based practices can support long-term healing. Across her work, she brings together academic training, real world clinical and coaching experience to help people stabilize their biology, befriend their bodies, and create lasting change. At the end of this session, we are going to turn off the recording, and for those who have joined us live, we will have a Q&A, live Q&A and discussion. So please stay for the whole time. Dr. Kristina is going to stay with us for a little while to join in that conversation. So I'm going to turn it on over to Dr. Kristina Dobyns. Thank you and welcome.
Thank you so much, Robin. It is so good to be here with everyone today. Um, Today, I'm going to talk about sensory strategies for nervous system regulation, which is something that has been really helpful in my own recovery. Robin, thank you so much for that bio. And I do have, this sort of mixed experience of education and experience with others, but I don't know if it was really emphasized or described that actually I have my own huge history of severe eating disorders myself. And so sensory strategies have actually been something that have been really helpful in my own recovery. And I studied it for my doctoral dissertation is really was regarding body-based strategies for coping with urges to binge eat. So it's something that I studied in my doctoral program as well. I'm excited to be here with the Metabolic Collective because you all probably understand how metabolic health and nutrition and sleep and light exposure and stress and biological support really change mental health, right? And what I want to offer today is a complementary angle, something that sits alongside all of that. And it is a layer that I have found personally transformative. A little bit about my own story. For 20 plus years, my life was truly crippled by binge eating disorder, bulimia, food addiction, even though that diagnosis is, not officially recognized yet. And I struggled with depression, anxiety, and severe suicidal ideations. At one of my low points, I gained 100 pounds in just 3 months, which is a lot. It was horrible and it was humiliating. But I have to say that wasn't even my lowest point. I would say at my lowest point, I just felt so suicidal because I didn't want to live with my binging anymore that I checked myself into residential treatment. And I tried everything. I tried, all sorts of therapy, the CBT, the DBT, all the therapies, all sorts of medication from Prozac to naltrexone to pyramate, Contrary to other meds, hypnotherapy. I spent thousands and thousands on neurofeedback, like a lot of different things, right? And to be honest, many things help just like a little bit, even for just a little bit of time, right? And the way that I consider my own recovery is basically like there's like this huge stubborn boulder, right? This big boulder, and you're trying to crack it open, right? And every tool that you use, whether it's a therapy session or some sort of nutritional shift or, whatever strategy you try, it's like striking that boulder with a chisel. And some strikes feel more impactful than others, but it's never just like one strike that breaks the boulder. It's the accumulated force of every single time. And eventually something gives. And you look back and you realize that it wasn't just that last hit, it was, all the things together over time. So that's what it was like for me. However, I still want to say that there were some things that felt a little more impactful than others. For me, nutrition was a big one, shifting to a ketogenic carnivore based approach has really stabilized my blood sugar and helped to diminish what felt like truly, overwhelming, relentless compulsions to binge, right? Understanding a little bit more about the science, learning about habit formation, neuroplasticity, the mechanics of urges helped me to stop pathologizing myself and instead, start thinking a little bit more strategically. Mindful eating was helpful, co-regulation, attention to circadian health, and somatic attunement because I was really disconnected from my own body, right? And the other thing that I felt was really helpful for me that I'm going to expand upon more today is the sensory strategies, which enter through the body and directly influence the nervous system, bypassing the need for higher reason and logic, which is, really important for a lot of us who are in these moments of dysregulation, whether it's, feeling like we're about to dissociate or we're having this strong craving, your, rational brain is offline. And so I needed something that was able to work with the fact that I don't have access to higher level reasoning in that moment. So sensory strategies were really helpful for me. So if we can imagine our nervous system in a spectrum, right? Or you can imagine a dial, like an arousal dial of the nervous system, right? So if we're working with the spectrum analogy, zero is like shut down, totally dissociated, like tired, like, very low arousal sort of state, right? And on the other end of the spectrum, the 10 could be the hyper aroused state, like the panic, the overwhelm type of thing, right? Our target state in general is going to be right in the middle around the 5 state, right? That's a kind of a sweet spot for day-to-day functioning because we are alert enough to engage, and yet we're calm enough to make good choices, right? And that's not to say that we have to stay at a 5 the whole time, because that is implying, sort of like a fixed state or a rigid state, which we don't want. We need the capacity to be flexible and adapt to the circumstance. That's what we really want, is to have a good sort of like middle state, but then adapt to the circumstance as needed. So, for example, if you are at a 5, but you're about to go to bed, you need to be a little bit lower on this spectrum. And so then, if you are aware of certain tools, sensory strategies that may be able to help you to dial down your arousal, that's going to be helpful. Or conversely, if you're about to run a race or you do theater and you're about to perform on stage, or for whatever reason, you need to have a higher level of arousal, if you know the strategies that can help you toggle it a little bit that way, that's really helpful. I conceptualize there to be basically 3 forms of using these strategies. One is experimentally, which we're going to be doing a little bit later. And that's like, we're just going to try it, right? We're going to do it together. We're going to notice how it feels. And, you can take note like, oh, okay, I like that. That one feels good. Or, no, thank you. But you have that experience to be able to make that decision if you want to implement this in the future or not. So experimentally. Another sort of way that we can use these strategies is interventionally, which means in the moment of an urge, a craving, a compulsion, a spiral, or like that pull to dissociate. If you're feeling that dysregulation, you can use a sensory strategy in the moment, and that may be able to help you to ground and so forth. However, clinically, it is really, it's a lot harder to, if you're already at like a 10 out of 10 or a 100 out of 10, it's going to be a sensory strategy is not going to be a miracle. So intervening as early as possible at the earliest whisper of that feeling that you notice in your body is going to be is going to be helpful, right? And so that points to the importance of developing our own interoceptive awareness of what, the particular dysfunction or the feelings feel like in your own body so that you can realize, okay, now is an opportunity for me to implement some certain strategies or do something for self-care so that it doesn't just keep on going, right? Which brings me to how I think that sensories are most usefully implemented, which is proactively. So proactively, so like a daily practice. It could be in the morning, it could be at certain, in a spot before you know you have a tricky, this time it seems to be a bit tricky. So you implement these strategies ahead of time or just throughout the day. But you may notice that when you implement sensory strategies proactively, that your nervous system is not so much of a roller coaster, but you don't feel the need necessarily to implement strategies interventionally because you've already proactively been paying attention to your body, been paying attention to your nervous system throughout the day. So, sensory strategies, they are, um, let me be little, like just say explicitly what they are. They're sensory inputs, or they're the blocking of inputs through our senses that can shift our nervous system state. And occupational therapy, even though my background is psychology, my sister has her doctorate in occupational therapy. She was the one that tuned me into this sort of thing, and I just fell in love with this and have applied it to eating disorders, which had never been done before. Sensory strategies have historically been developed within the context of a pediatric population. Um, Kids who were suffering with sensory processing disorder or like autism, but it's called sensory modulation. Historically, it's been called sensory modulation in occupational therapy, and it has since been applied to adults with for mental health reasons. And I was looking at this for eating disorders. And so I love this. So occupational therapy has been the pioneers in this have been pioneers in this research, and they have identified three powerhouses as far as t sense, right? The first powerhouse is deep pressure touch. So that is like a something weighted input, firm self massage, laying, what's like a cobra in yoga where you're laying on your stomach. That can be very, very calming. There's also proprioceptive input, your muscle and your joint input, moving your muscles, using your muscles to squeeze, to push, to press, resistance work, like push-ups or squats, can be also very calming. And the third powerhouse that they have identified is slow, rhythmical vestibular input. So that is gentle rocking of the head from side to side in a very predictable fashion. It can be front and back. And so those three inputs have been identified as the powerhouses, right? However, so many different, we can engage all our different sensory systems to think about how we can toggle our nervous system. So, and it's a matter of you experimenting for yourself because, generally things may have an impact. It's really important for you to try it on your own because what may be pleasant for you may be unpleasant for someone else. What may be perfect for you might be overstimulating for someone else. So it's really important to gather that information for yourself as a curious, as a curious investigator of your own nervous system. So, for example, if we talk about the visual sense, I have a light on right now, and I turned it on because it helps me to feel alert during the day. It helps to show my surroundings. However, if I was trying to wind down at night, maybe I want to put a dim light. I want a light that's lower to the ground, maybe a red light, right? Some people love having an office full of pictures and affirmations and I don't know, quotes and stuff like that, reminders. Other people are very irritated by visual clutter, and it would actually really help them to regulate their nervous system to have a very simple, bare environment. So those are just some examples with the visual system, but you can apply it for everything. Smells, candles, essential oils, flowers, plants, Some people might find things like lemon or eucalyptus to be alerting, and lavender maybe is a little bit more soothing. Sounds, for example, some people like white noise to go to bed. Some people prefer silence while working. Some people like just a little bit of music, maybe a little jazz. I personally like a little lo-fi, but some people that would be too distracting, and they actually really benefit from blocking the sensory input by using noise canceling headphones. There's touch, so the types of fabrics and the clothing that you wear. Um, are you wearing clothes that are, too tight and they're itchy? You know, just considering how do these things have an impact on our nervous system. We're constantly making decisions, whether it's putting on a sweater or putting on some certain clothes or turning on lights, and we're doing these things sort of outside of conscious awareness, but these things have an impact on us. So what I'm offering is, what if we were more intentional about our sensory inputs or the blocking of sensory inputs? How can that improve our recovery or our health and wellness? So, going back to that curious investigator idea is as we go through these, we're about to start the strategy soon, and so I invite you to just kind of get curious on what you're noticing, if there's any change from now until we start the practice in the end, and in between each different um, strategies, we're going to just try 8 together. If you want to get a piece of paper, if you have something handy, you're welcome to, or on your computer if you want to write a document. But um, because ultimately, what you can do if you're really interested in this and you want to continue with these sort of the pursuit of sensory strategies and noticing how they can impact you, is you can keep a log. Have a dedicated notebook or just a sheet, and you can have different columns. And the first column, for example, could be, what did I try? And you can write your own word for it. It doesn't have to be, you know, it can just be something that helps you to remember what was the thing that you tried. What strategy did I try? The next column could be when and where. And then the next column could be, did it help? And you could maybe just do like a 1 to 5 star rating. Then you could also have a column like, would I use it again? So in that way, you are building your own personalized toolkit. So it's not just like a generic protocol, but it's something that you have vetted and you have that embodied experience for yourself. And then you can be like, oh, okay, this is something that works, or this is how it impacts me, it alerts me, it calms me, or, this one doesn't work for me, but you have that embodied experience so that you can make those informed choices. So before we get started, oh, one more thing, sorry. Just we are going to be doing these. Some might be sitting, some might be standing, if that works for your body. And just in general, do, modify anything, skip anything, honor yourself. Just do what feels good and safe in your body. Okay. So let's take a moment and center ourselves, settling into wherever you're sitting, or if you're standing like me, however you are. Just take a moment and settle in and feel the weight of your body being held by whatever surface you're on. Let it hold you. I invite you to take a breath in through the nose and let it fall out through the mouth. And gently scan from the top of your head down through your face, through your jaw, through your throat, your chest, your belly, your hips, your legs, your feet. And no need to change anything. Just notice, what do you feel right now? Any tension, a buzzing, warmth, whatever it is, just observe. And if your eyes aren't already open, I invite you to gently blink them open. So our first strategy that we're going to try together is, I'm just calling it a hand press and squeeze. So press your palms firmly in front of your chest, like you're trying to push your hands through each other. And if possible, try to keep some distance in between your ear and your shoulder. So we're not scrunching, just keeping your shoulders dropped and just pressing through the hands in an isometric squeeze. Just notice how that feels. And then you can adjust your hands to come to the side like this, or the other side, or crisscrossing. And feel free to change them around if you want. And I will say that in my doctoral research, I was actually surprised this one was actually a pretty popular strategy because people liked introducing this in a public environment because some of these strategies are like larger movement, take up space, might draw attention. But this one is something that you can do when you're at work, if you're at school, you're in a public place and you don't want to draw attention to yourself. This one is very subtle. Okay, and release. Just notice how you're feeling. And next up is a pendulum self-hug. I have very small arms, so I don't really wrap myself really well. But if you do have longer arms, please wrap around yourself multiple times as much as you can. Just give yourself a hug here, firm squeeze, and then allowing yourself to tap opposite shoulder or wherever your hands land. And this one, if you'd like, you can close your eyes. We'll just do this for a few moments more. And let's release and notice what you notice. Now we're going to do some slow head tilts. So very slowly, let your right ear drop towards your right shoulder, and then left ear towards your left shoulder. Slowly, predictably, rhythmically, you can let gravity help. Back and forth, back and forth. And again, if you're feeling safe, like, if you're standing, you're not going to fall over if you close your eyes. But if you'd like to, sometimes it's helpful to tune into yourself if you close your eyes. So if you'd like to experiment with that, you can close your eyes while continuing these head tilts. And when you're ready, you can release that movement. And notice if anything has shifted. Even just a small shift is worth noticing. And next, we are going to do ear massage. So you use however you want to with massaging your ears, but get in there, It doesn't have to be hard, just whatever feels the most pleasant for you. And make sure that you get all the parts of your ears, the lobe, the outer ridge, the inner part of your ear, do behind your ears. You can even pull on the bottom of the lobes, like where women tend to wear earrings. There are branches of the vagus nerve accessible through the ear. So let's continue with this ear massage for a few moments more. And release when you're ready. Notice, notice what you notice. And next we're going to do a body tap. I'm at a stand-up desk. I'm gonna lower this desk so you guys we can lower the webcam. So for this one, you can use an open palm or a closed palm. I'll use a fist. Um, yeah, this is one of my favorites actually. So we can start with either arm, and you're gonna tap down your arm and then come all the way up. Tapping down, coming back up, tapping down, coming back up, and going to the other side. Tapping down, coming up, another time, and another. And you can do as hard or as light as the taps feel good for you. And we're going to go down the side, tapping down the side a couple times. And the other side. And again, feel free to modify as you like. If something feels really good and you want to continue, go ahead and do that. We're going to go down the chest, down the torso, getting at the crease in the hip. And then in the back, the kidneys area. And then we're going to go down the back side of the legs and up the front side. So down, all the way down and up, down and up. One more time there, down and up. Now you might want to put your feet about shoulder width apart, and then we'll go down the outside and then up the inside. Down the outside, up the inside, make it your own. Down the outside, up the inside. Okay. I'm definitely feeling warm. I love that one. Okay, so now we're moving on to strategy number 6, squat and reach. And the squat, if you've got knees that are a little tricky, you don't have to squat low. It could just be a micro bend if you'd like, or if it feels good for you to get that movement in your body, you can of course sink as low as you'd like to. I like to also match breath with movement. I particularly like inhale as I reach up and exhale as I squat down, but you can experiment for you. So let's do this together. Inhale, exhale, reach and squat, reach and squat. If you want to get on your tippy toes when you reach, you can. And squat. Inhale, exhale. Let's do one more. Great. All right. Notice how you feel now. Okay. I don't know if some of you guys want to stand up again. We have two more to go that would probably be more comfortable standing up, if that's fine with you. It's a figure eight with your arms. So your arms are going to be mostly straight. They can have some, bend in the elbow if you'd like. And you're going to go cross body. I prefer from down to up. So in the form of a figure eight. And your feet can do whatever feels best for you. If you'd like to allow the heel to come up as you pivot, or if you want to keep your feet grounded, that's fine. And allow yourself as big of a figure eight as you can. And I love the way this feels in my core. And this is great for thoracic rotation as well. Let's do a couple more. These nice big figure eights. Okay. Release when you're ready. Just take a moment. Notice how you feel. I love that one as well. Just feels, it does something for me. I love that one. And the last one that we will try together is just some shaking and bouncing. So you can just have a gentle knee bend. You can keep your whole foot on the floor if you'd like, and just allow your knees to bend. You can let your arms be free and just let them rock how they will. You can turn to one side or the other. And if you want to add a little oomph, you can raise your heels, like keeping your toes on the ground, but just dropping the heels a little bit more forcefully. There's this type of bounce. Or if it's okay with your toes, your feet, ankles, knees, and hips, you can actually get airborne if that's okay with your joints. So there's different ways that you can bounce. And then there's the shake too, shaking it out your whole body, releasing, and then take a moment to notice what you notice. Pardon me while I raise this desk once more.
So I'm going to cut in while you're doing that and just say, guys, the plan is to have an actual live Q&A with cameras after we finish. But before we do that, I want to ask, and I don't, obviously you weren't actually finished, you were raising your desk and I cut in, but I would like to ask, it's funny because these are things that I do for myself sometimes, and I guess I don't know why I'm doing them for myself. I just find myself like I do the swingy arm thing all the time.
Mm.
So I guess that's just my natural way to calm myself down. And I've never thought about it before. But you were talking about how you've used this and it was part of your dissertation specifically for um, binge eating or food addiction. Uh, so before we close out the video portion, can you just kind of touch onto how each of those things, where we would want to apply them, how they are useful for those particular instances?
Yeah, so let me see if I'm understanding your question correctly. So for example, we just tried 8 strategies. And
Mhm.
mind you, there's there's more possibilities than we could ever imagine because there's yeah, any sort of thing there can be tiny little adjustments to make it be different for us. So in my dissertation, I gave them a list. Basically based on the primary sense that is addressed. So all of our senses are working all at the same time. So for example, to say a push-up, for example, is a proprioceptive exercise, we could say just for heuristic, we say, okay, it is proprioceptive, but truly because we are also generally have our eyes open and we're listening to things and we're feeling all sorts of things. And, we're engaging the interoceptive sense. We are, there's all the senses are working together all at once, right? So we can't really say something is, oh, it's only something that is for the visual sense, or it's only for the auditory sense, or the gustatory sense, or the oral motor, whatever. But we categorize things based on the generally in the field of occupational therapy and how they create these sort of sensory diets is what they're called. They're based on the primary sort of sense. And so I gave them a list per that standard of like, okay, here are some primarily vestibular, practices, proprioceptive, based on, you know, um, the visual sense or so and then they were to practice them on their own to choose practice and then create a short list that worked for them. So let's say they tried these different ones and then they created a short list of 3 to 5 strategies that they would intend to practice when at the earliest noticing of an urge to binge in their body. So as soon as they noticed the urge, then they were instructed to practice their previously identified strategy and then implement it and see how that would affect the intensity of the urge. So it really is, it really is something that each person has to experiment with. Again, the field of occupational therapy has identified proprioceptive vestibular and slow rhythmical vestibular input vestibular and deep pressure touch as being typically considered powerhouses. That being said, for example, some people actually don't like being hugged, so like a deep pressure touch could be a nice tight hug, right? Some people really don't like that, so that's not going to work for them. So in general, those three powerhouses could be good for anyone to experiment with as sort of like a first line, um, for proactive sensory input or for interventional sensory input. Um, but really, it's a matter of finding what works for a person because, you, Robin, were saying, hey, okay, I noticed I'm doing these certain things. I was never intentional. I didn't realize that was what I was doing. And then again, the thing is, okay, well, what if we were deliberate in sort of noticing the ways that we make adjustments for ourselves on a daily basis and even expand on that to, see how can we support our own health, wellness, and recovery through strategic inputs. I'd say that, doing things in the morning proactively is really helpful to sort of, start the day that way. If someone knows that there's a certain rough time of the day, doing something an hour ahead of time with with the sensory strategies that they have identified as being helpful for them can help because it seems that those powerhouse strategies, for example, can last like their impact on the nervous system can be at least a few hours. So doing it, let's say, an hour in advance is helpful. Um, someone might say, okay, I know that when I play this certain song, it really helps me. Or, they have a fidget toy and this fidget really helps me. Or, getting in the cold plunge, really, really helps me. If I'm noticing that I'm getting into that compulsive place or like I'm in my head and I'm starting to spin, I know that a cold plunge is really going to help me. For me personally, those bigger movements were more helpful. It was interesting in my doctoral research. Some people really gravitated towards those discrete times, like they really like the things that no one could see, like things that didn't require standing up or a lot of body motion. They really like that. And that was curious to me because I actually have had the opposite experience. For me, I like the big things. I like the movement. Like that to me feels a lot more regulating and tangible than something that's more discrete. But then that just points to, hey, we all need to experiment for ourselves with what works for us. And also it can depend on the circumstance and the time. So what might work for us in one moment. So for example, maybe I love this, right? This is really helpful, but let's say what if I am in a place where I think in general I don't really care how, people if I do this and people look at me or I don't care. But what if it did happen that there was a time and space place that that was not that did I didn't feel like this was acceptable. I would need to adapt. So having a sort of having, I say arsenal, having like experience with many different sensory strategies can be helpful. If something happened that I don't have access to my normal strategies, I can always find something else that works. Some people have found developing a proactive sensory plan to be helpful. And what that could look like is, for example, you go through, different sort of things and you've identified what you like. And so then you can say, okay, well, I'm going to do deep breathing 5 minutes a day. I will do some sort of proprioceptive activity. You know, I love I love the gym. I know that you like the gym too, Robin. So like, getting in that proprioceptive, maybe you didn't think, oh, this is proprioceptive activity, but indeed that's what it is. So making sure that you're getting in proprioceptive activity, resistance training or whatever, minimum of 10 minutes a day, right? A couple days a week, right? Vestibular input, so maybe the slow head rolls for 1 to 2 minutes a day, because that one you only need a little bit. It goes a long way. So let's say 1 to 2 minutes of vestibular input a day. And then deep pressure, such as self massage or like getting on that foam roller, wearing a compression garment, or getting under a weighted blanket, or like a little like thing for your shoulder or your lap. Or honestly, what can also provide us that deep pressure touch is cuddling and holding a pet. Like your little doggy or your cat can also do that. And so that could be like 5 minutes a day, and then a higher intensity movement twice a week, and social and co-regulation stuff, at least once a week. So that's just kind of like an example of how you might be thinking about it in a proactive sense. Like, hey, I want to make sure that I'm getting these type of inputs, whether it's daily or weekly, and then the converse. And I talk about these sensory inputs, and I always implicitly mean the blocking of inputs as well. If that's what you need, if you need to wear noise canceling headphones, or you find that you need to block certain inputs, that would also be considered in your proactive sensory plan. So hopefully that answers your question, Robin.
It answered the question and the follow-up questions that popped into my head. So
Okay,
you did
okay,
it all, and I didn't have to say any of it out
okay,
loud. So
okay. I'm
that
glad
was
that
amazing.
we've got because of our Dobbins connection, we're psychic. So
Yeah, we got it. We can hear
mhm.
each other's thoughts.
Cool.
Well, I'm being conscious of time because you do want to have an interactive moment. Is there anything else you want to say to the YouTube population who may be watching this at a later date?
Oh,
Like, for
okay. Well,
example, where people can find you.
thank you so much for bringing that up, Robin. Yeah, so Um, I'm working on changing my website, but at the moment, I'd say the best place I'm working on getting up at drkristinadobyns.com as sort of like a central hub for various things. But for right now, Beyond Binge Eating is good. If anyone wants to email me for whatever reason, I welcome that. My email address is info@beyondbingeeating.com. And I also do want to say that I am in the process of organizing a yoga and movement retreat with carnivore and ketogenic food. So if you are interested in that, then please email me at info@beyondbingeeating.com.
That sounds amazing. And I know it's been your dream. We've talked about it before. So I'm very excited for you. Okay, so I'm going to round up this. Thank you, Dr. Kristina Dobyns, for joining us and teaching us. I'm very excited about all of this, what you have to offer and what you've shared with us today. But we're going to turn off the camera or the recording. And you people who are joining us on YouTube, if you want to hear what goes on after the meetings, you got to join us live next time. You can find our events at metabolic collective.org. Bye.